We know old Hollywood stars as glamorous, fearless, and larger than life. But what if we told you many of them were hiding strange fears you'd never expect? From a horror legend terrified of eggs to a leading lady who couldn't stand butterflies, these are the most bizarre and unexpected phobias that shape the lives of cinema's biggest icons. Stick around, because some of these fears are weirder and more relatable than you'd ever imagine. Alfred Hitchcock, fear of eggs, ovophobia. Alfred Hitchcock made his living terrifying the world. He directed psychological thrillers, crafted some of cinema's most unsettling moments, and was nicknamed the Master of Suspense. But despite all the dark things he showed on screen, there was one real-life fear he simply couldn't face. Eggs. Yes, eggs. Hitchcock once admitted, "I'm frightened of eggs. That white round thing without any holes. And when you break it, inside, there's that yellow thing, round, without any holes. Blood is jolly, red, but egg yolk is yellow. Revolting. I've never tasted it." He called it a repulsion rather than a phobia, but his words make it clear. This wasn't just mild discomfort. The man who directed Psycho and the Birds was deeply disturbed by the sight of something most of us scramble for breakfast. His fear, known as ovophobia, never quite impacted his work, but it did shape the way people thought about him. Here was a man who could handle suspense, horror, and violence on a massive scale, but a simple egg could rattle him. It made him human, in a way even more fascinating. But Hitchcock wasn't the only horror master with surprising fears. The next legend spent a career surrounded by monsters, yet couldn't stand to be alone in the dark. Peter Cushing, fear of the dark, nyctophobia. Peter Cushing built his name on chilling performances in Hammer horror films. He fought vampires, summoned demons, and played Frankenstein more than once. But what most fans didn't know was that off-screen, he had a personal fear that followed him for life: the dark. Even as an adult, Cushing found darkness unsettling. He described feeling anxious and disoriented when the lights went out. An ironic twist for a man so often cast in terrifying roles. To fight back, he developed a habit of taking late-night walks. Not because he enjoyed them, but to prove to himself that he could. He once said, "I always had a fear of the dark, but I never allowed it to win." This struggle added a layer of realism to his roles. His fear wasn't fake. When you watched him tremble in a candlelit castle or flinch in a crypt, part of that fear was real. And that's what made him so compelling to watch. While Cushing faced his phobia head-on, the next icon did her best to hide hers. She was one of the most glamorous women in Hollywood, but she was also haunted by an invisible fear she could never shake. Marilyn Monroe, paranoia and stage fright. Marilyn Monroe is remembered for her confidence, her allure, and her breathtaking presence on screen. But few people knew that behind those bright lights and red lips was a woman deeply afraid of rejection, of judgment, and most of all, of not being loved. Monroe battled extreme stage fright throughout her career. Even during her most successful years, she would freeze before going on set or appearing in front of a crowd. She doubted herself constantly and relied on acting coaches and friends just to get through the day. "I knew I belonged to the public and to the world," she once said. "Not because I was talented or even beautiful, but because I had never belonged to anything or anyone else." Her fear wasn't just about forgetting lines, it was about being exposed, unworthy, inadequate. She craved love and approval, but lived in fear of losing it all. That anxiety followed her through every relationship and every performance. And though the world adored her, she never fully believed it. From the woman who lived under a spotlight to the man who avoided it at all costs, our next story is about an actor who couldn't bear being looked at, even when it was his job. Montgomery Clift, fear of public exposure. Montgomery Clift was one of the most gifted actors of his time. Sensitive, intense, and impossibly magnetic. But behind his performances was a man who feared the public eye with a near-crippling intensity. Clift hated interviews. He avoided premieres. He loathed being photographed when not in character. His fear of public exposure was tied to something deeper: anxiety, insecurity, and the overwhelming pressure to be someone he wasn't. He once told a friend, "Acting is the only time I'm not afraid. When I'm on stage or in front of a camera, I don't have to be me." Clift lived a private life in a very public industry. That fear of being truly seen, flawed, vulnerable, shaped everything he did. It influenced the roles he chose and the way he interacted with directors and castmates. His reclusive nature made him all the more mysterious to fans, but for Clift, it was a constant battle between art and anxiety. And then there's the case of a man who could deliver Shakespeare to a packed house, but whose fear struck just before he stepped onto the stage. Laurence Olivier, fear of public speaking, glossophobia. Laurence Olivier was a titan of the stage and screen, arguably one of the greatest actors of the 20th century. But even legends have their demons. For Olivier, it was a fear of public speaking that haunted him throughout his life. Despite his command of the spotlight, Olivier suffered from severe bouts of stage fright, sometimes so intense he thought he would faint. Before major performances, he would tremble backstage, overcome by panic that his mind would go blank. He said, "It's like something takes over. Your throat closes, your legs go, you feel like you're dying." To cope, he developed strict routines, warming up his voice, rehearsing every line, even using lucky charms to stay calm. Still, the fear never fully left him. It's hard to imagine that such a powerful performer lived in fear of the very stage that made him famous. But that's the truth of phobias. They don't care how talented or beloved you are. And in our next story, we meet a woman whose on-set experience with real terror gave birth to a fear that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Tippi Hedren, fear of birds, ornithophobia. Tippi Hedren will forever be remembered for her role in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, a film that redefined horror and set a new standard for suspense. But what the audience didn't know at the time was that her fear on screen wasn't just acting, it was very real. And it didn't end when the director yelled, "Cut!" During filming, Hedren expected the bird scenes to be done with mechanical props. But in a brutal twist, Hitchcock demanded real birds be used. For 5 straight days, she was pelted with live seagulls, ravens, and crows, some of which were tied to her costume with elastic strings. One of them even slashed her under the eye. She later recalled, "They just kept throwing birds at me. One got tangled in my hair, another clawed at my face. I was hysterical by the end." The trauma was so severe that she developed ornithophobia, a lasting fear of birds that plagued her for decades. She couldn't go near them. She flinched at the sound of wings. What was meant to be her big break turned into a lifelong trigger. It's a chilling reminder of how deeply Hollywood could blur the line between performance and abuse. But while Tippi's phobia was born on set, the next star's fear came from something even more common and far more unexpected. Johnny Depp, fear of clowns, coulrophobia. Johnny Depp has built a career on eccentric roles, many of which toe the line between charming and downright creepy. From Edward Scissorhands to the Mad Hatter, he seems at home playing oddballs. But there's one costume he'll never wear, and one character he'd never want to face: the clown. Depp suffers from coulrophobia, the fear of clowns. It's not just a mild discomfort, it's a deep-rooted unease that dates back to his childhood. He once admitted in an interview, "It's the painted-on smile. You don't know what's underneath. It feels like a mask hiding something truly evil." Even though he's portrayed whimsical, clown-like figures himself, the traditional circus clown, with its exaggerated features and forced cheerfulness, unnerves him. He avoids clown imagery and refuses to attend events where clowns might appear. What's most fascinating is that, like many actors, he channels that fear into his performances. It's part of why his characters often carry a touch of madness. They reflect his own unease with surface-level happiness and forced identities. But while Depp's fear is visual and rooted in symbols, the next actor's phobia is tied to objects, furniture of all things, and it's one of the strangest cases in Hollywood. Billy Bob Thornton, fear of antique furniture. Billy Bob Thornton is known for being eccentric, and he embraces that fully. But even his most devoted fans were surprised to learn about one of his oddest fears: antique furniture. Thornton has openly admitted that being around old furniture makes him physically uncomfortable. He once told a reporter, "You can put me in a room with a chair from 1850, and I'll break out in a cold sweat." He associates antique pieces with death, ghosts, and what he calls old souls trapped in wood. Even something as simple as a Victorian-era side table makes him want to leave the room. His fear is so intense that he avoids staying in hotels furnished with antiques and has even turned down roles that required filming in historical settings. On set, he asks for modern furniture whenever possible, and if that's not an option, he avoids touching or sitting on old chairs altogether. It may sound strange, but for Thornton, it's not a joke. It's a deep, visceral fear that shapes how he lives, works, and even chooses his scripts. Next, we move from furniture to something far more delicate: butterflies. Yes, butterflies. And for one elegant actress, their wings weren't symbols of freedom. They were nightmares with eyes. Nicole Kidman, fear of butterflies, lepidopterophobia. Nicole Kidman has walked red carpets, starred in horror films, and faced down some of Hollywood's most intimidating roles. But there's one thing she won't face under any circumstances: a butterfly. Despite their gentle image, butterflies absolutely terrify Kidman. She developed lepidopterophobia as a child in Australia, when her parents' home had a garden full of them. While other kids chased them around in play, Kidman would run inside and hide. In an interview, she said, "I tried to overcome it. I walked into a butterfly cage once, and it was a nightmare. They're beautiful, but unpredictable, and that freaks me out." She avoids gardens, refuses to film near butterfly exhibits, and has even asked production teams to digitally alter or remove butterfly imagery from sets. It's not about drama. It's about real, physical discomfort. This fear contrasts sharply with her polished, graceful public persona. But it's a powerful reminder that fear doesn't always make sense. Sometimes, even the gentlest things can become sources of dread. And speaking of invisible threats, our next star built her life on laughter and charm, but behind the scenes, she waged a daily war against something we all carry with us: germs. Cameron Diaz, fear of germs, germophobia. Cameron Diaz is known for her sunny smile, laid-back energy, and girl-next-door vibe. But beneath the casual charm is a serious, long-standing fear of germs. Diaz has spoken publicly about her obsessive cleaning habits. She avoids handshakes, washes her hands constantly, and even uses her elbows to open doors. "I clean doorknobs like 5 times a day," she once said. "You never know what people are carrying." Her fear is more than just caution, it's a lifestyle. She's been known to wipe down airplane seats, refuse to use public restrooms, and travel with her own supply of sanitizer and wipes. Friends say she even wore down the paint on her home's light switches from cleaning them so often. The irony? She made millions making people laugh in raunchy, carefree comedies, but privately, she was battling constant anxiety about hygiene and contamination. Her germophobia influenced everything from her travel habits to the kinds of roles she took, and may have even played a part in her decision to retire from acting. Coming up, we meet an actress whose fear isn't about what's dirty or dangerous, but about something far more strange: the simple, dry texture of paper. Megan Fox, fear of paper, papyrophobia. Megan Fox has played fearless characters, from gunslinging rebels to seductive robots. But there's one thing that makes her visibly uncomfortable: dry paper. Yes, paper. Specifically, the feeling of handling it. She's been very open about this peculiar phobia, which has followed her since childhood. "I just can't stand touching paper. It's like nails on a chalkboard," she once told an interviewer. "It gives me goosebumps. I always have to lick my fingers before touching a script." Her aversion is so strong that she sometimes asks crew members to wear gloves or bring her digital copies of materials during shoots. Even simple tasks, like opening a mail envelope or flipping a page, can trigger her discomfort. It may sound irrational, but papyrophobia is very real for Fox. The texture, the sound, the way paper dries out her skin, it all adds up to a sensory nightmare. Her team even keeps lotion on hand just so she can soften her hands before handling anything dry. This unusual fear is a fascinating contradiction for someone who appears so polished and in control. But it shows that phobias don't care how famous you are. They creep in, uninvited. And speaking of strange triggers, our next actor has a fear that hits him in the most unexpected places: revolving doors. Matthew McConaughey, fear of revolving doors. Matthew McConaughey is known for his easygoing charm, Texas swagger, and those deep, drawn-out, all rights. But hidden beneath that cool exterior is a very specific, very strange fear: revolving doors. That's right. The Oscar winner who played astronauts, lawyers, and romantic leads has admitted he'll go out of his way to avoid them. He's also uncomfortable in tunnels and enclosed round spaces, which he says make him feel trapped. In an interview, he revealed, "There's just something about those spinning doors. I feel like I can't get out. Like I'm gonna be stuck in there, going in circles." This might explain why he's often seen using side entrances at events or skipping red carpets altogether. He's not trying to be difficult. He's avoiding a trigger. McConaughey's fear isn't debilitating, but it's real. And what makes it more intriguing is that it clashes with the image Hollywood has crafted of him. The guy who's always relaxed, always in control. Sometimes, the smallest spaces can feel like the biggest threat. And that brings us to a celebrity whose fear centers on something even more personal: her own body. Khloe Kardashian, fear of belly buttons, omphalophobia. Khloe Kardashian grew up in front of the camera. Millions have seen her evolve, hustle, and build a business empire. But very few know that she lives with a bizarre and deeply uncomfortable phobia: fear of belly buttons. It's called omphalophobia, and Khloe has it bad. She won't touch her own navel, and she avoids touching or even looking at others' belly buttons. "It makes me feel like I'm gonna vomit," she once admitted. "If you try to put your finger in your belly button, it feels like you're messing with your organs." To avoid the sensation, she covers her stomach in the shower and avoids tight clothing that might make her aware of her navel. On photo shoots, stylists know not to suggest outfits that reveal her midriff. What's wild is how this phobia clashes with her public image. She's posed in bikinis, modeled lingerie, and graced dozens of magazine covers. But every one of those shoots involved managing her fear behind the scenes. Chloe's story shows how even the most confident people can have hidden quirks that never quite go away. Next up is another young celebrity with a very specific and surprisingly relatable phobia that revolves around something you probably have in your kitchen right now. Kylie Jenner. Fear of dust in a cup. Kylie Jenner is one of the most recognized faces in the world. A billionaire businesswoman, reality star, and global influencer, she's built an empire off beauty, branding, and a highly curated image. But beneath the glam, there's a lesser-known part of Kylie's personality, one shaped by a strange but very real fear. Kylie has a phobia of drinking from cups that have been sitting out, even for a short time. Her fear? Dust. More specifically, dust collecting inside the cup, even if the cup looks completely clean. "I don't drink from cups that have been sitting out," she admitted during a Q&A. "Even if they look clean, I always imagine there's dust, or something worse, in them." To some, that might sound extreme, but for Kylie, it's serious. She reportedly goes as far as rewashing freshly cleaned dishes, avoids using cups that aren't straight out of the cabinet, and even travels with her own bottles or tumblers. It's not about luxury or being difficult, it's about comfort, safety, and peace of mind. This fear blends germophobia and sensory discomfort. It's a form of contamination anxiety, rooted not just in hygiene, but in the idea of something unseen, something possibly harmful. The thought alone is enough to ruin her appetite or trigger a spiral of discomfort. And in Kylie's world, where everything is always observed and judged, control becomes a lifeline. Psychologists often say that phobias like this stem from a need to reclaim power in a life that feels overexposed. And for Kylie, who's been in the spotlight since childhood, that makes sense. She grew up on television, lived her teenage years under a microscope, and has been dissected by millions on social media. Something as simple as a clean cup becomes a way to take control in a world where she controls so little. This fear may not stop her from running a company or walking red carpets, but it is part of her daily life. It influences her habits, her home, and her comfort level with others. And it's a reminder that fears aren't always big and dramatic. Sometimes they're small, hidden, and deeply personal. As she once put it, "I like knowing my environment is clean. It just makes me feel safer. I don't think it's weird. I think it's smart." Kylie's fear may seem odd on the surface, but at its core, it's deeply relatable. It's about the little things that help us feel secure. And like many of the phobias on this list, it's not about the object itself. It's about the thought of what might be lurking in it. And while Kylie worries about what's inside a cup, our next actor spent much of his life worrying about what was going on inside his own mind. His battle wasn't with the external world, but with a loop of rituals and thoughts he couldn't easily escape. Up next, Leonardo DiCaprio's lifelong struggle with obsessive-compulsive disorder, and how playing one of the most famously obsessive men in history made that struggle even worse. Leonardo DiCaprio, obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the most respected actors of his generation. He's played everything from tortured artists to ruthless businessmen, and he's won awards that many dream of just being nominated for. But behind the accolades and red carpet glamour is something far less talked about: a private struggle with obsessive-compulsive disorder, better known as OCD. This isn't a Hollywood quirk or a dramatic anecdote. It's a condition that has deeply shaped how DiCaprio functions on a daily basis. He's spoken candidly about the rituals and routines he feels compelled to repeat, often at the expense of his time, focus, and peace of mind. He's admitted to walking through doorways multiple times. If he misses the right step or doesn't follow the exact pattern his brain demands, he'll circle back and start over. Sidewalks are a challenge too. He often steps over cracks or stains in a very particular rhythm. If something feels off, he has to do it again. "It's like a mental itch you can't scratch," he once said. "If I don't do it, the anxiety just builds and builds." This internal battle became even more intense during his role in The Aviator, where he portrayed aviation pioneer and billionaire Howard Hughes, who famously suffered from severe, debilitating OCD. To embody the character, DiCaprio immersed himself in Hughes's compulsions. But the role did more than challenge him professionally. It unearthed and amplified his own tendencies. "Playing Hughes really triggered something in me," he revealed. "I started tapping things more, washing more, and the rituals got stronger. It was hard to separate myself from the character. At one point, the rituals became so intense that they began affecting his sleep and concentration. Yet instead of hiding it, DiCaprio leaned into the experience, using it as a way to better understand both himself and others dealing with mental health challenges. Despite his struggles, DiCaprio has managed to thrive. He's learned how to live with the condition, not let it dominate him. For many fans, his honesty about OCD has been more impactful than any movie role. It's a reminder that no level of fame or talent makes you immune to personal challenges. This fear doesn't look like panic or dread. It looks like tapping a doorknob 3 times before entering a room. It looks like restarting a walk down the street because your feet didn't land just right. It's quiet, invisible, and often misunderstood. But DiCaprio's journey shows that with awareness, compassion, and support, even something as difficult as OCD can be managed. "It's part of who I am," he said, "but it doesn't have to control me." And as we head into our final story, we meet a performer whose fear didn't hide behind perfection. It screamed into silence and pushed her off stage for nearly 3 decades until she found the strength to face it. Barbra Streisand. Social anxiety. Barbra Streisand is a name that defines excellence. Her voice, her stage presence, her undeniable talent. Few artists have achieved the kind of iconic status she holds. But for over 27 years, she didn't perform live. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was afraid. At the height of her fame in 1967, Streisand was performing in New York's Central Park when she forgot a lyric mid-song. The crowd was huge. The moment, devastating. That single mistake sparked a fear so deep it grew into full-blown stage fright, crippling social anxiety that haunted her for decades. She later described the experience as paralyzing. The fear of making another mistake, of being imperfect, stopped her from doing the very thing she loved. "It was like a trauma," she said. "I couldn't go on stage without thinking it would happen again." From that day forward, Streisand avoided live concerts. She focused on films and recordings instead, places where mistakes could be edited, rehearsed, controlled. And even then, the fear never fully went away. When she finally returned to the stage in the 1990s, it was under strict conditions, teleprompters, controlled environments, and a carefully selected audience. But the courage it took to come back after so long showed just how strong she truly is. Barbara's story is proof that even legends have limits, and that fear doesn't discriminate. No matter how powerful, talented, or beloved someone is, anxiety can creep in and change everything. From forgotten lyrics to cracked sidewalks, from butterflies to belly buttons, these bizarre phobias remind us that even the biggest stars live with small, very human fears. They may seem untouchable on the screen, but behind the fame, they're just like the rest of us. Turns out, even Hollywood legends had fears that made them human. From clowns to revolving doors, these phobias prove fame doesn't erase anxiety. If you enjoyed this countdown, give it a like, subscribe for more stories behind the stars, and let us know, what fear surprised you the most? Thanks for watching.